But with that being said, welcome everybody to our first session for, the first breakout session for day 2 of the NETA conference. I'm Tony Trudella, obviously a NETA member. I'm also on the governing board as well as the secretary, but I'm here working as a facilitator here today, a moderator, whatnot. But really what I'd like to do is, again, welcome you to joining us in this session about developing systematic, independent college transfer. And your facilitators today, your presenters are going to be Emily Decatur and Stafford Peat, and I'm going to get out of the way and let them introduce themselves. And they have asked if you do have questions that you would like to answer, please use the chat function. We are not using CrowdLive, CrowdPer for this session, so please type in your questions in the chat function box there. So Emily, Stafford, take it away.
Thanks so much, Tony. We're really excited to be back here at the NETA conference, even though it is virtual next year. Hopefully we'll be able to see each other next year. I'm going to share my screen. All right. Everyone see that all right? Okay. All right, so I'm Emily Decatur. I am the lead for all of our transfer initiatives work that we do at the New England Board of Higher Education. So Stafford and I are spending most of our time currently over the last couple of years working on the New England Independent College Transfer Guarantee. We've presented at, I think, a couple NETA conferences at this point about the guarantee, amongst other transfer work and reports that we have written. And this is my colleague, Stafford Peat. He's our senior policy and research consultant.
I'm so happy to be with you this afternoon and presenting with Emily Decatur. You can't get better than that.
Okay, so I'll just give a brief outline about what we'll be doing today. We'll kind of set the stage, talk about what problems we're trying to address with our initiative, the guarantee. We'll dive into what the guarantee is, our agreements, our methodology, foundational design, as well as our guiding principles. And then we'll get into kind of the meat of the presentation today, which is presenting on our early lessons learned in the form of challenges and then solutions that we found. And then I think we'll have probably like 5 or 10 minutes at the end where you guys can ask us questions. But if anything does come up as we move through, just feel free to pop those questions right into the chat. All right, so I don't really need to review this whole slide with all of you since you're all transfer professionals and heroes here in the group today. But as we know, transfer inherently has a lot of complexities and barriers for students. Amongst those really are the credit loss. I think for us too, we've noticed the lack of standardization and systemization across public and private transfer. There's a lot of disparity there. Transparency in general is a bit of an issue. Finding information that's clear for students, affordability, equity, all that good stuff. So through the guarantee, we hope to offer some solutions. And these are the solutions that the guarantee really does offer to students and institutions. The unification of statewide systematic transfer, really promoting a student-centered approach and a transfer receptive culture for these students, opening up the doors to provide greater access, opportunity, and affordability, collaboration and partnership, and also really leaning into this radical transparency that's targeted towards the transfer audience. So I guess I'll say up top, if some of you are unfamiliar with our work in the guarantee, I'll get into the nuts and bolts of that in a moment here. But through the guarantee, we're working in Connecticut, Massachusetts, and Rhode Island to create systematic transfer pathways from community colleges for those that hold an associate's degree into independent four-year institutions that are participating with us as a guaranteed admissions. And there's really not much by the way of eligibility criteria other than the fact that a student needs to have their associate's degree from an in-state community college and hit a certain GPA criteria or eligibility for that student. So our mantra really behind the whole guarantee is a degree is a degree. And some of you I see are from Massachusetts. And so you may remember this at one of our early on convenings we hosted at Holy Cross. One of the community college transfer counselors stood up and said, we need to honor the degree as a degree. So the associate's degree is the proof that the student has been successful, and we need to honor their community college audit. So we've really kind of taken that on as our mantle. So through the guarantee, we're moving away from one-to-one agreements, articulation agreements, things of that nature, towards more of this idea of block transfer and master agreements to help standardize things. Some things that are key features of the guarantee, which we'll go into in a moment here as well, are providing gen ed core waivers for students, having flexible credit applicability, and really providing students and institutions with a transparent and streamlined process. I think one of the biggest outcrops that's happened from working within the guarantee and with our institutions is that now institutions, especially our four-year partners, are really given the opportunity to look at their existing legacy transfer policies and reevaluate them and ask themselves, do these policies really serve our students? Are they helpful or are they harmful? And really being able to kind of look at that in a more holistic way and reform transfer policy, which is really great. Okay, so what is the guarantee? So as I kind of briefly explained, it's a state-specific systematic transfer for guaranteed admission from community college into four-year independent institutions. So this is not a regional effort, I will mention. This is really only within these states. So you can see our guaranteed admission eligibility is that associate's degree from the in-state community college, an eligible GPA. Some of the key features and benefits include an application fee waiver, financial aid and scholarship incentives. Some of these are merit-based, which is really great, but having them specifically for transfer students is really key to this, because historically, many of these transfer students have been kind of locked out of receiving certain scholarships and aids that typically go to more traditional first-year students. Also, the guaranteed transfer of credit. So who's participating? Currently, 100% of the community colleges are participating, and about 60% of independent institutions in all three states are participating. Our partners include the independent college associations in Massachusetts, Connecticut, and in Rhode Island, as well as the public higher ed systems. We work with them really closely because part of our methodology is unification through alignment with state policy, which we'll get into as well. Okay, so how are we doing this? When we thought about how we wanted the guarantee to look, we really leaned into this idea of unification and also simplicity and simplifying things for students. So we're pretty lucky, especially within the states of Massachusetts and in Connecticut. Massachusetts and Connecticut already have well-established guaranteed transfer of associate's degrees policies on the books that are up and running. So what we've done is really taken those policies and replicated them within the guarantee. So what that means is a student then can meet all the eligibility criteria, and at the end of the day, either end up at a four-year in-state college or university, or potentially one of the schools that are participating in the guarantee. And they don't really have to do any other sort of work. They don't have to dig through articulation agreements. It's all guaranteed. So we've created these memorandums of agreement, which are all on our website, which I'll show at the very end, and you guys can go check it out. They're really these great comprehensive documents which outline roles, responsibility, the methodologies, policies, and practices. They provide a lot of recommendations. We're not trying to be super prescriptive. Flexibility kind of has to be inherently baked into the guarantee, because independent schools are not within a system like they are within the public. So we can't necessarily mandate a lot of really stringent requirements for all of these institutions. So it's been about finding the balance between the two. We have some key appendices there, which have to do with institutional transfer policy alignment. So institutions, we have the recommended set of policies that align with state policy, but then institutions are able to clearly mark if they are outside of any of those policies. So students know right off the bat if there's anything else that they need to know that could affect the transfer of their credits. So, like I said, this is a state-specific initiative, so the methodology of the guarantee varies slightly from state to state. In Connecticut, we're going with a tiered GPA approach. So there are 3 tiers, 2.0, 2.5, and 3.0. So institutions that are participating can select which tier they'd like to offer guaranteed admission to institutions for, which is really great. In Connecticut, there aren't as many independent institutions as there are in a state like Massachusetts. So in Massachusetts, we were able to stay with the 2.5, which is the mass transfer guaranteed admission GPA criteria there. In Rhode Island, once again, we're going with another tiered system here. 2.0, 2.4, and 3.0. That 2.4 is to align with Rhode Island state policy for guaranteed admission through their JAA program. So that's why it's a little bit different than Connecticut. We wanted to link the two of those there. All right, so I'm more of a visual person, so I also provided this little infographic to kind of describe the guarantee itself. So as you see on the umbrella, the key features are really guaranteed admission to an institution. So this is not necessarily super pathway specific. And we kind of came to this methodology out of all of our convenings and working with our steering committees in each state, and found that most of our institutions wanted the flexibility of more of a guaranteed admission to all programs or programs that they select, rather than having to map pathways, which could take a lot of time. But we do know that map pathways are important, so they're part of our scaffolding. So you have guaranteed admission to the institution if you meet that eligibility criteria, and the application fee waiver. The mapped pathways, as I explained, can kind of nestle under the guarantee. So this is kind of great for institutions because there are a lot of articulation agreements that are already on the book. So they can kind of utilize some of those mapped pathways and nestle them under the guarantee. I'll also say that we did a lot of research where we are focusing on the liberal arts specifically for this initiative. And then we're also going to be incorporating majors outside of that as well. And we know that most associate's degree holding students that are looking to transfer either have degrees in general studies or liberal arts. So a lot of them inherently aren't already in these very specific prescribed pathways. So kind of opening up that flexibility a little bit is going to serve the greatest number of students. So also the kind of raindrops under the umbrella that we have here are those scholarships and incentives. An example of that would be Suffolk University. They have their 2.5 guaranteed admission, but if you are coming in with a 3.0, then you get a merit scholarship, which I believe is like 30% or something of your tuition. So really catering towards the students that are looking to transfer into your institution and making it more affordable for them. We also have that gen ed fee waiver, or not fee waiver, just the gen ed waiver for students. This has kind of been a key point within the guarantee. All of our participating institutions are accepting the gen ed block, whether it's Massachusetts or Connecticut, as a block. So all of those, 32 credits, 34, 36, depending on the state, come over as a chunk. So that really is helpful to our students, kind of getting them halfway there, as well as our guiding principles. All of this, work on policy and practice is really critical, but without kind of the structure of guiding principles, we might not be looking at transfer in a more holistic way. That's why we've included these as part of our project here. And I'll hand that over to Stafford to talk about a little bit.
Oh, thank you, Emily. I think Emily describes the guiding principles as the ethos of the guarantee. And I might not use ethos, I might use foundation, critical aspect. I think they all are relevant and all are interrelated. But what we ended up doing is coming up with a set of guiding principles that were informed by research we'd done in looking at other states, we looked at Ohio, we looked at California, we looked hard, long and hard where they existed. We also looked at a number of research reports, including the Jack Kent Cook Foundation Persistence Plus report, and looked at where the evidence was. If this particular principle was in place, it would benefit students. It would not only benefit students in their transition to the institution, but also in their retention and final graduation. So I have to say is that a couple of the guiding principles you'll see, and they're available on our website, are really coming directly from our steering committee. And they provided I think, some great advice, some guidance, some wordsmithing. And so I think we feel pretty, I guess, we feel pretty committed to using these guiding principles as we continue not only working with the 3 New England states, but possibly working with other states as well. So the first one we have as an example is that, and clearly, I think the first 2 you're going to certainly recognize and identify with is that community college students bring a different perspective based on their life experiences, their diversity in academic preparation. They also, I think, based on the data, is they're able to graduate at a rate equal to, or in some cases greater than, incoming graduates. They're doing that, especially in cases in which the supports are there for those students. Students also bring life experiences. They bring certainly strong career aspirations and different cultural and socioeconomic backgrounds. So I talked a little bit about the pre-application, post-acceptance support services. It's just another reminder of how important they are in the successful transition of students. So with that, these are 3, I think, altogether, I think we have 14 guiding principles that we have incorporated, as Emily's mentioned, into the MOA that institutions and state SHIO offices in some cases have signed off on, as well as NEVI. So Emily, I'm going to ask you to turn to the next slide, which is our first challenge. So how do we create collaboration amongst public sector and in the independent sector? And as we all know, that they're natural competitors. I think they're competitors, but in the long run, they're working towards the same end, which is to provide students with a first-class, world-class, if you will, education and prepare them for certainly life after college. So we began with this notion of an exploratory phase, and I want to be very thankful of our funder, the Teagle Foundation, who provided us with a 6-month planning grant in which we really had the opportunity to speak to a lot of individuals from secretaries of education to transfer coordinators to college presidents. We've run the whole gamut here. And so I think we used a top-down and bottom-up approach. And we can also, I think, use that same approach if we reverse it. We used a bottom-up and top-down approach. So we've certainly, I think we got that as a recommendation in the first NETA conference we presented at. And so we've deployed that all along the way. We've really encouraged discussion, feedback, and open dialogue during the development. We were able to do that in a series of state meetings when face-to-face meetings when those were possible before the pandemic shut us down, and certainly shut certainly a lot of institutions down, including probably your own college or university. We also developed some organizational structures that promoted collaboration and vehicles for getting input and advice, and in some cases, decision-making. So we've used steering committees. Each state has a steering committee, as well as we have an overall steering committee. I have to say, they've provided us with a great deal of support. And as I said before, guidance and decision-making. And I think we've erred on actually using them for a lot of things, and they've been terrific. As Emily's mentioned before, we've placed students at the front and center. As a transfer student myself, I recognize how difficult it is in the transfer process. Who do you listen to? What do you read? And so we recognize fully that transfer is not an easy endeavor. And to be successful, you need a number of different ingredients, as well as, and most importantly, probably is really good advice from transfer advisors. The other thing we've done is we've created a one-pager on the institutional benefits of the guarantee to department heads and faculty. We've made the case to them. That's available on our website. So it's a one-pager if you want to hand it to someone saying, why are we working so hard on supporting transfer students and getting them into our institution? That one-pager will help answer that question. So I'm going to turn over to the second challenge is the unification. I think Emily has talked a little bit about unification. We've talked about promoting standardization. What we did learn, and I have to say, we've become experts at looking at institutional transfer websites. We've probably looked at well over 100. And what we can tell you is there's very little standardization and very little in the way of consistent information on the websites, as well as there's not a lot of consistency from one state to the other. Hence, I think that's one of the reasons why this is an in-state transfer initiative. But we did begin with this notion that there has been a lot of work done by states in developing state transfer policies. So we've used them. We've used them whenever they were possible. And we've also, I think, made the case that unification has not only a benefit to the students, but it also has a benefit to the state itself. Its benefit is really increasing credential attainment and economic competitiveness. So that's been a feature. I think the second is, once again, we've mentioned before, is standardization. We've used this master agreement versus individual articulation agreements. And its feature is really as a guaranteed admission to the institution. No ifs, ands, or buts about it. If you meet the minimum requirements, you're guaranteed admission. uh, I know we have a slide coming up, and Emily is going to talk about that, is the importance of institutions looking at their legacy transfer policies. We hope to be able to do a report later this year that sort of examines what policies have been changed. And we'll be happy to share that broadly with the NETA community. Flexibility. It's important to be flexible. Where we had map pathways, we built on those. Where there wasn't map pathways, we used a more flexible credit applicability. What we've heard over and over again is that we need some flexibility. Institutions need flexibility to substitute courses, um, substitute maybe requirements. I think probably the best example is maybe a course in religion for religiously affiliated institutions like Tony's. And so I think that process has been, it's been ongoing. It will continue as we add additional institutions. I might say at this point, we have 29 independent institutions are participating in the guarantee. You'll find those on our website, as well as all of the community colleges. So I'm going to turn this over to our third challenge. And this one's yours, Emily.
Thanks, Stafford. Okay, so our third challenge is enhancing transparency and also improving transfer websites. So I think I neglected to mention this before when we were discussing the guarantee and what we're doing in each state, but I would be remiss if I didn't give you a progress update on where we are. So in Massachusetts, we're fully implemented. That picture you see on the screen here is from our Massachusetts Guarantee landing page. So students are eligible to start enrolling through the guarantee and taking advantage of the benefits of it right now. We're also fully implemented in Connecticut. We should be launching our Connecticut webpage, our landing page on ct.edu, hopefully next week or the week after. And then in Rhode Island, we have just developed an MOA. And so we're working through that phase with them now. We kind of put that on pause during the pandemic a little bit there. But transparency is just so critical for these students. And I think it's really keeping the transfer audience in mind and speaking to them in a language that they can understand. As Stafford mentioned, we've looked at hundreds, if not thousands at this point, of different transfer sites. And we've also heard from all of you at our convenings when we were together about some gripes about your own institutional web pages for transfer and whatnot. And they can be very cumbersome for students. A lot of them are just pages upon pages of policy, words that they don't truly understand, and they really need somebody to walk them through the process. So what we're really trying to promote here is to just simplify everything for the students. So have really clear and cohesive messaging for them. So what we've done with the websites is kind of twofold for our project. One is the landing pages that serve to promote the guarantee in general, where students can go and get information on the guarantee. And then the second to that is the institutional web pages themselves. So for our landing pages, we've really focused on this collaboration and partnership that we've been talking about here today, and worked with our state partners in order to have them host our guarantee landing page on the state website. That was super critical, and I think a big win for Stafford and I was to have these landing pages on state websites, because we really wanted students to be able to go to one spot and get all the information they need. So whether they're interested in going to a public school or a private school, they can just go to the website and figure out what's the best option for them and see all of them in one place. So that's been, I think, really, really great, and has been a good win for us. the improving the institutional transfer web pages. We've provided guidance and templates for our participating institutions, and we've seen a lot of great web pages come out of this. And I think it is helpful for our institutions that are participating as well to be able to participate in something like the guarantee and then be able to take that to whoever manages their web development and say, hey, would like this page to look like this in order to serve the students better. And so we've gotten a lot of great responses already from our institutions that are participating, letting us know that they've had a really great response to their new websites they've put up because they are much more simplified than they were in the past. And it's just part of our looking at transfer in a more holistic way to serve the students. All right, our challenge number 4 is about visibility and promotion. So when Stafford and I first started out, when the guarantee was just kind of a twinkle in our collective eyes, we talked to our friends out in California back in 2019. Back in, I think it was August 2019, California had just unified transfer, the guaranteed transfer of an associate's degree for publics and independent institutions. So we kind of were talking to our colleagues out there and picking their brains. And one of the biggest takeaways that we had from that conversation was Tom Vu let us know that you need to really set aside money and budget for marketing and promotion, because all this work that you're doing or will start to do is really wonderful. But if students don't hear about it, you're not really able to help them as best as you can. So we've always kind of had that in the back of our mind. And right now, where we are in our process with rolling out the guarantee, we've contracted with a Newton, Massachusetts based design firm to help us really create some cohesive branding and messaging for the guarantee. So what we're going for here is a campaign and messaging that's, once again, our favorite word, simple and effective. We're creating these brand strategy guidebooks for all of our participating institutions, so everything is really clear. Those will be supplemented by materials that they can then be customized for the institutions to use in their own recruitment efforts. We're putting together focus groups. So we kind of have focus groups that fall into 3 buckets. One group is community college students that are interested in transferring. The second bucket is students that have transferred from a community college into an independent institution. And the third are transfer counselors. So we want to kind of hit all the bases and figure out what kind of messaging, what kind of materials will be most effective when we go to promote this on a larger scale. Our promotion of the guarantee is going to be kind of twofold once again. Stafford and I at NEBI will be facilitating kind of this overarching statewide campaign. So more general branding and messaging, reaching out to a large target audience. But what's really great is we're really utilizing our independent institutions that are participating because they already have these really great engines of great admissions counselors and officers and recruitment, and already have great marketing departments. So we will support them by providing them with materials and certain content and copy, and then they're able to tailor it the way that they see fit. So a lot of this is actually kind of in the hands of the independent institution as well, how they want to promote this. So that's where we are right now with promotion and what we are doing. So I know we might have kind of a mixed group here today, probably folks from community colleges, private institutions, or maybe even public four-year institutions. So I just kind of wanted to touch on how initiatives like the guarantee can serve to benefit all institutions, public and private. I think it's been so beautiful to see the partnerships that have arisen from this across the private and public sector, specifically in New England. You know, we have such a high concentration of higher education institutions, and they really are drivers of the economy. And with this enrollment crisis that we're having due to the birth rate decline, you know, it's really important for institutions to kind of start to band together. something like the guarantee is kind of offering up this platform of healthy competition, I think, for schools, because we are, as Stafford likes to call us, somewhat of provocateurs a bit in this space, because we're really pushing for all institutions to look at their policy, to reevaluate it. And then once schools start to change that, once more schools get on board with this idea of guaranteed admission, flexibility of credit, this idea of block transfer, gen ed core waivers, it kind of just raises the bar higher and higher, and the rising tide tends to lift all boats. And that really truly benefits students. And I think that's where our partnerships have been really strong, is everybody that we've been working with wants to serve the students first. So I think this has been a really great exercise and practice for everyone. A little bit about how are we doing on time here? We're almost running to the end. A little bit about sustainability, creating this culture of collaboration. We'll be collecting data and looking at metrics for success, and really focusing on building the system that works for all and not just some students. So I'll stop that there. And I guess just open it up to anybody. Does anybody have any questions? We're a smaller group, so I think you don't necessarily have to use the chat. I'm fine if you just want to unmute yourself and ask away.
So Emily, I have a question. And I know it's going to seem a little different from, so you have about, you said 60% of the independent colleges and universities that are participating in the states that you're doing that. Have you heard from, for the schools that obviously had been approached, but have decided not to participate, at least at this time? Is there does it seem to be there are certain reasons that, are you hearing the same reason for a school choosing not to participate, or a couple of their, what are some of the big reasons, the most popular reasons you've heard for a school that's chosen not to participate at this time?
Yeah, to be honest, we really haven't had many schools say they don't want to participate. The only schools that really haven't expressed interest are the ones that can't feasibly offer guaranteed admission at the levels that we've offered, at a 2.5 or even a 3.0. So a lot of the highly selectives are kind of just automatically out. That we do have a lot of schools that are working behind the scenes in order to start looking at their transfer policy and kind of getting their ducks in a line before they want to sign an MOA, which Stafford and I obviously 100% support that. It's part of the work that we're doing. But honestly, we've really been met with like overwhelming support from most institutions in the region.
I think, Tony, to further answer the question, I think what we've heard is from nearly every institution, we love transfer students. We especially like transfer students from community colleges. I think that's because of that appreciation and how well those students do. There haven't been very many institutions who've said no. I think Emily's pointed those out. Highly selective institutions are probably, and we have quite a number of them, as you well know, in New England, but especially in those 3 New England states. So, but I have to say is that we've gotten very little pushback from other institutions, and we expect additional institutions over and above the 29 have already joined, including at least 5 from Rhode Island.
Yeah, so it's rolling admission, if you will, for submitting an MOA to participate. And I think it'll be that way, for forever, really the foreseeable future. Whenever an institution wants to join, they can sign the MOA and join our group.
Emily, I have a quick question. Comment first, the amount of work that must have went into this is crazy. But I'm just curious, is there a timeline as to when, possibly other remaining New England states can jump on board?
Yeah, no, that's a good question. So we started off primarily in Massachusetts, Connecticut, and Rhode Island because we have close partnerships with the independent college associations in those states. But our intention is to scale the guarantee for sure. So Stafford and I are looking at starting to look for some funding and whatnot in order to scale the guarantee. So we're hoping maybe, I think if I'm being realistic, maybe 2 years from now, really implementing that would probably be doing something similar to what we did with this kind of first phase of implementation, which is start with 6 months of planning, get all that buy-in, convene everybody, and then we can hit the ground running with implementation and signing of MOAs.
That's great. Thank you.
They're so quiet, Tony. Come on, get them charged up.
Bueller, anyone? No. So the other thing we know is that a group such as this, there are people like me that probably ask questions and open their mouth before they've given a lot of thought. But we also know that there are a lot of times that people want to take things away, process, maybe look at the resources that you've talked about provided on your website and other questions that may so maybe they're processors, and as they look at things, more questions can come up. So certainly know that this isn't the last opportunity that you would have to connect with Stafford and Emily and be able to reach out to them afterwards, after this presentation's over, somewhere down the road with your questions too. Sure, we want to make sure to keep that dialogue open and have those questions answered as they do come in. So that being said, I don't know if there's anything else that you guys want to share before we wrap up. We're just about at time. Got another couple of minutes left, but.
Yeah, so you can feel free to reach out to me or Stafford. If you go to nebhe.org, nebhe.org/the-guarantee, you can find all of the information, all of the updated things. Definitely feel free to check out our landing page on mass.edu. Let us know what you think. We'll hopefully continue to revise and make it more student friendly as we move along. So thank you, everybody.
Well, thank you, Tony, for being our facilitator, and thank everyone for joining us this afternoon.